Why are you trying to help the community?
You know, I think that the legacy of our people is such that if we don't help ourselves, we can't wait on anyone else to. And so it's our collective responsibility to make sure that we're making our contribution, whatever that contribution is. You know, protests can take many forms. Some of us need to go out into the street. Some of us need to go into the classroom. Some of us need to do that work in the church house. Some people need to feed folks. Some people need to make sure that the word is out. So we've all got a role to play, and it's absolutely going to take all of us to win this thing.
Okay. Yeah. And with you being such a big activist in the community and you dealing so much with Ferguson and doing Teach for America, what keeps you motivated?
Oh, man. The folks that came before me that helped me to be where I am, and recognizing that responsibility that I have to pay that forward. Young people keep me motivated. You know, there's so many people who have sacrificed so much more than I have in this movement, who remain on the front lines, whose names we will never know, who'll never, you know, be in an interview or don't have the Twitter followers. And they're making the sacrifice every single day. And if they can do it, right, I can stay in it. And so what keeps me motivated is knowing that we very simply have to create a different world for our children. And if we don't take up the work, who will? Yeah.
Why did you come to speak to Xavier students today? Out of all the schools, why does this make it different?
Well, you know, I will always believe in historically black colleges and universities. And when I think about the history of New Orleans, the history of this institution, some of our brightest stars come from right here. And those folks, just like you guys, are committed to justice, you're committed to social change, you're committed to our community. And so to have the privilege really to speak into and hopefully inspire the lives and the work of young people who we need to continue to do this work every day is a real honor for me.
Oh, that's great. And what do you think we as African Americans can do, should do to change what's going on in our society today?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things we can do is identify what our purpose is and make sure that we pursue it. So, you know, I was a teacher, I'm an activist. That's not because I'm particularly special, but I know what gifts God placed in me, and so that is my work to go and do. Other people have different gifts, and they need to go and make sure that they fulfill those toward the end of helping the community. I think it's also really important that we remain incredibly educated and enfranchised voters. So, you know, a number of activists, we put together a site called it's called joincampaign0.org. It's a 10-point platform toward the end of ending police violence in America. And so we want people to sign that pledge, but also to educate themselves and to take that 10-point platform to their mayors, their city councils, all the way up to these folks asking for our vote in 2016 for the presidential election, and say, this is what matters to us, and you need to protect our communities if you want to be in a position of power. So we have to make sure to continue to educate ourselves about who we are, about what matters to us, and continue to make our voices heard on those issues.
In your tweet, what did you mean when you said, one day I'll write about how Ferguson has challenged my black middle-class existence and how disappointed I am in other black folk like me? What did you mean by that?
Wow, you just want me to spill all the tea. Okay, so let's go there. So, before Ferguson was popular, it was dangerous, right? And it was dangerous in a number of ways. It was physically dangerous. It was emotionally dangerous. We were out there till 1 and 2 in the morning, never knew what was going to happen, didn't know sometimes if we were going to walk away with our lives. We had to entrust our lives to people that we had maybe only met 5 minutes before. But it was also dangerous professionally, right? So there are lots of folks who are not pleased with the engagement that I and others have had, right? People have lost their jobs over this. People have lost that level of comfort. And as the days kind of continued on, I saw more and more African-American folks with financial privilege like myself deciding to opt out, deciding to take that privilege and go back to the other side of town, get in the fancy car, pick up that fancy handbag and say, you know what, this is not the fight for me. And I think it's particularly unfortunate because we are stronger together. And what I learned in Ferguson was that the comfort that I received from my financial privilege doesn't make me free, right? Being able to afford a Marc Jacobs bag doesn't free me, right? It actually, because I can still die at the hands of police, right? I can still end up sending my kids to a school that isn't made for them. And so recognizing that my struggle, even as a middle class person, is bound up with every other black person's struggle, whether or not they're rich or poor, they're gay or straight, they're trans or cis, it doesn't matter. My fate, my freedom is tied up with yours. And so I was disappointed to not see people disengage their privilege in that way and make a choice to say, I'm going to sacrifice my comfort, my financial comfort, to do what's right. And so I'm hopeful that as we continue to move through this thing, we'll see people let go of their privilege, Black people let go of their privilege and participate more.
And with you saying that, for people who want to get involved with Black Lives Matter, but there's no real racial inequality and police brutality happening where they live, how can they still get involved?
So the thing to remember is that this movement is not just about police violence, right? That we recognize that police violence is the branch of a tree rooted in systemic oppression and racism. And so the real work is to uproot that entire tree. And that tree has branches that are inequitable education, poor housing, underemployment and unemployment, the lack of a living wage, access to health care and quality foods. So there are lots of ways that if you take notice, right, and if you really pay attention and do your research, that systemic oppression and racism is impacting your community. It might not look like police brutality, but it looks some other way. And so making sure that you are aware of those things and then thinking about how you can turn those things around in your community. It might be starting a community garden so that people that live in food deserts actually have access to fresh produce. It might be starting a tutoring program so that you can help augment the kind of learning that young people are getting. It might be joining a program like Teach for America. It might be standing on the front lines and protesting every day. What you go and fulfill it in a way that will directly serve the issues in your community.